Chapter 4. I won't be a carer anymore come the end of the year. And though I've got a lot out of it, I have to admit I welcome the chance to rest. To stop and think and remember. I'm sure it's at least partly to do with that. To do with preparing for the change of pace that I've been getting this urge to order all these old memories. What I really wanted, I suppose, was to get straight all the things that happened between me, Tommy, and Ruth after we grew up and left Hailsham. But I realize now just how much of what occurred later came out of our time at Hailsham, and that's why I want first to go over these earlier memories quite carefully. Take all this curiosity about Madame, for instance. At one level, it was just us kids larking about, but at another, as you'll see, it was a sort of a process that kept growing and growing over the years until it came to dominate our lives. After that day, mention of Madame became, well, not taboo exactly, pretty rare among us, and this was something that soon spread beyond our little group to just about all the students in our year. We were, I'd say, as curious as ever about her. We were all sensed that to probe any further about what she did with our work, whether there was really a gallery, would get us into territory we weren't ready for yet. The topic of the gallery, though, still cropped up every once in a while, and so that when a few years later Tommy started telling me beside the pond about his odd talk with Miss Lucy, I found something tugging away at my memory. It was only afterwards, when I left him sitting on this rock and hurrying towards the fields to catch up with his friends, that it came back to me. It was something Miss Lucy had sent to me during a class. I remember it because it had puzzled me at the time, and also because it was one of the few occasions when the gallery had mentions to deliberate in front of a guardian. We've been in the middle of what we later came to call the tokens controversy. Tommy and I discussed the tokens controversy a few years ago, and we couldn't at first agree what it had happened. I said we'd been 10 at the time. He thought it was later, but in the end, he came around to agreeing with me. I'm pretty sure I got it right. We were in junior 4, a while after the incident with Madame, and still 3 years before our talk by the pond. The tokens controversy was, I suppose, all part of our getting more acquisitive as we grow older. For years, I think I've said already, we thought that having work chosen by the billiards room, never mind taken away by Madame, was a huge triumph. And by the time we were 10, we've grown more ambivalent about it. The exchanges, or their system of tokens as currency, had given us a keen eye for pricing up anything we produce. We'd become preoccupied with t-shirts and with decorating around our beds, with personalizing our desks, and of course we had our collections to think of. I don't know if you had collections where you were. When you came across old students from Hailsham, you always find them, sooner or later, getting nostalgic about the collections. At the time, of course, we took it all for granted. You each had a wooden chest with your name on it, which you kept under your bed, filled with your possessions, the stuff you acquired from the sales or the exchanges. I can remember 1 or 2 students not bothering much with their collections, but most of us took enormous care, bringing things out to display, putting other things away carefully. The point is, by the time we were 10, this whole notion that it was a great honor to have something taken by Madame collided with the feeling that we were losing our most marketable stuff. This all came to a head in the tokens controversy. It began with a number of students, mainly boys, muttering that we should get tokens to compensate when Madame took something away. A lot of students agreed with this, but others were outraged by the idea. Arguments went on between us for some time, and then one day, Roy J., who was a year above us and had a number of things taken by Madame, decided to go and see Miss Emily about it. Miss Emily, our head guardian, was older than the others. She wasn't especially tall, but something about the way she carried herself, always very straight with her head right up, made you think she was. She wore her silvery hair tied back, but strands were always coming loose and floating around her. They would have driven me mad, but Miss Emily always ignored them, like they were beneath her contempt. By the evening, she was a pretty strange sight, with bits of loose hair everywhere, which she couldn't bother to push away from her face when she talked to you in her quiet, delicate voice. We were all pretty scared of her and didn't think of her in the way that we did the other guardians. We considered her to be fair and respected her decisions, and the juniors would probably recognize that it was her presence, intimidating though it was, that made us all feel safe at Hailsham. It took some nerve to go and see her without being summoned. To go with the sort of demands Roy always seemed pretty suicidal. But Roy didn't get the terrible telling off we were expecting. In the days that followed, there were reports of guardians talking, even arguing about the tokens question. In the end, it was announced that we would get tokens, but not many, because it was a most distinguished honor to have work selected by Madame. This didn't really go down well with either camp, and the arguments rambled on. It was against this background that Polly T. asked Miss Lucy her question that morning. We were in the library, sitting around the big oak table. Remember, there was a log burning in the fireplace, and we were doing a play reading. At some point, a line of the play had led to Laura making some wisecrack about the tokens business, and we'd all laughed, Miss Lucy included. Then Miss Lucy had said that since everyone at Hailsham was talking about little else, we should forget the play reading and spend the rest of the lesson exchanging our views about the tokens. And that's what we were doing when Polly asked, completely out of the blue, "Miss, why does Madame take our things anyway?" We all went quiet. Miss Lucy didn't often get cross, but when she did, you certainly knew about it, and we thought for a second Polly was for it. But then we saw Miss Lucy wasn't angry, just deep in thought. I remember feeling furious at Polly for so stupidly breaking the unwritten rule, but at the same time being terribly excited about what answer Miss Lucy might give. And certainly I wasn't the only one with those mixed emotions. Virtually everybody shot daggers at Polly before turning eagerly to Miss Lucy, which was, I suppose, pretty unfair on poor Polly. After what seemed a very long while, Miss Lucy said, "All I can tell you today is that it's for a good reason, a very important reason, and if I try to explain it to you now, I don't think you'd understand. One day, I hope, it will be explained to you." We didn't press her. The atmosphere around the table had become one of deep embarrassment, and curious as we were to hear more, we wanted more for the talk to get away from this dodgy territory. The next moment, they were all relieved to be arguing again, a bit artificially perhaps, about the tokens, but Miss Lucy's word had puzzled me, and I kept thinking about them on and off for the next few days. That's why that afternoon by the pond, when Tommy was telling me about this talk with Miss Lucy, about how she said to him we weren't being taught enough about some things, memory of that time in the library, along with maybe one or two other little episodes like that, started tugging at my mind. While we're on the subject of the tokens, I just wanted to say a bit about our sales, which I've mentioned a few times already. The sales is important to us because that's how we got hold of things from outside. Tommy's polo shirt, for example, came from a sale. That's where we got our clothes, our toys, the special things that hadn't made by other students. Once every month, a big white van would come down that long road, and you'd feel this excitement all through the house and grounds. By the time it pulled up to the courtyard, there'd be a crowd waiting, mainly juniors, because once you were past 12 or 13, it wasn't a thing to be getting so obviously excited. But the truth was, we all were. Looking back now, it's funny to think we all got so worked up, because usually the sales were a big disappointment. There'd be nothing remotely special, and we'd spend our tokens just renewing stuff that we were wearing out or broken with more of the same. But the point was, I suppose, we'd all of us in the past found something at a sale, something that had been special, a jacket, a watch, a pair of craft scissors never used but kept proudly next to a bed. We'd all found something like that at one time, and so however much we tried to prevent otherwise, we couldn't shake off the old feelings of hope and excitement. Usually there was some point in hanging about the van as it was being unloaded. What you did, if you're one of those juniors, was to follow back and forth in the storeroom with two men in overalls carrying the big portable boxes, ask them what was inside. "A lot of goodies, sweetheart," was the usual reply. But if you kept asking, "But is it a bumper crop?" they'd sooner or later smile and say, "Oh, I'd say so, sweetheart, a real bumper crop," springing a thrilled cheer. The boxes were often open at the top, so you'd catch glimpses of all kinds of things, and sometimes, though they weren't really supposed to, men would let you move a few items about for a better look. And that was why, by the time of the actual sale, a week or so later, all sorts of rumors would be going around. Maybe about a particular tracksuit or a music cassette, and if there was trouble, it was almost always because a few students had set their hearts on the same item. The sales were a complete contrast to the hushed atmosphere of the exchanges. They were held in the dining room hall, and were crowded and noisy. In fact, the pushing and shouting was all part of the fun, and they stayed for the most part pretty good-humored. Except, as I say, every now and then things would get out of hand, with students grabbing and tugging, sometimes fighting. Then the monitors would threaten to close the whole thing down, and all of us had to face a talking to from Miss Emily at assembly the next morning. Our day at Haysham always began with an assembly, which was usually pretty brief. A few announcements, maybe a poem read out by a student. Miss Emily didn't often say much. She'd just sit very straight on the stage, nodding at whatever was being said, occasionally turning a frosty eye towards any whispering in the crowd. But on the morning after Rowdy's sale, everything was different. She'd ordered us to sit down on the floor. We usually stood at assemblies. There would be no announcements or performances, just Miss Emily talking to us for 20, 30 minutes, sometimes even longer. She rarely raised her voice, but there was something steely about her on these occasions. None of us, not even the junior fives, dared make a sound. There was a real sense of feeling bad when we had, in some collective way, let down Miss Emily, but try as we might, we couldn't usually follow these lectures. It was partly her language, unworthy of privilege and misuse of opportunity. Those were two regular phrases Ruth and I came up with when we were reminiscing in our room at the center in Dover. Her general drift was clear, though. We were all very special, being Hailsham students, and so it was the more disappointing that we behaved badly. Beyond that, though, things became a fog. Sometimes she'd be going on very intensely, then came to a sudden stop with something like, "What is it? What is it? What can it be that thwarts us?" Then she'd stand there, eyes open, a frown on her face, like she was trying to puzzle out the answer. And although we felt bewildered and awkward, we'd sit there willing her on to make whatever discovery was needed in her head. She might then resume with a gentle sigh, a signal that we were going to be forgiven, or just as easy to explode out of her silence with, "But I will not be coerced. Oh no, neither will Hailsham." And we were remembering these long speeches. Ruth remarked at how odd it was they would be so unfathomable, since Miss Emily in a classroom would be as clear as anything. When I mentioned how I had sometimes seen the head wandering around Hailsham in a dream talking to herself, Ruth took offense, saying, "She was never like that. How could Hailsham have been the way it was with the person in charge had been potty? Miss Emily had an intellect you could slice logs with." I didn't argue. Certainly Miss Emily could be uncannily sharp. If, say, you were somewhere you shouldn't be in the main house or on the grounds, you had a guardian coming, you would often hide somewhere. Hilsham was full of hiding places, indoors and out, cupboards, nooks, bushes, hedges. But if you saw Miss Emily coming, your heart sank because she always knew you were there hiding. It was like she had some extra sense. You'd go into a cupboard, close the door tight, and not move a muscle. You just knew Miss Emily's footsteps would stop outside, and her voice would say, "All right, out you come." That was what had happened to Sylvie C., one of the second-year landings. On the occasion Miss Emily had gone into one of her rages. She never shouted like, say, Miss Lucy did when she got mad at you, but if anything, Miss Emily getting angry was scarier. Her eyes narrowed and she'd whisper fiercely to herself like she was discussing with an invisible colleague what punishment was awful enough for you. The way she did it meant half of you was dying to hear and the other half completely not wanting to. But usually with Miss Emily, nothing too awful would come out of it. She hardly ever put you in detention, made you do chores, or withdrew privileges. All the same, you felt dreadful, just knowing you'd fallen in her estimation, and you wanted to do something straight away to redeem yourself. But the thing was, there was no predicting with Miss Emily. Sylvie may have got a full portion that time, but when Laura got caught running around the rhubarb patch, Miss Emily just snapped, "Shouldn't be there, girl! Off you go!" and walked on. And there was the time I thought I was in hot water with her. The little footpath that went all around the back of the main house was a real favorite of mine. I followed all the nooks, all the extensions. You had to squeeze past shrubs. You went under 2 ivy-covered arches and through a rusted gate. And all the time you could peer in through the windows, one after the other. I suppose part of the reason I liked this path so much was because I was never sure if it was out of bounds. Certainly, when classes were going on, you weren't supposed to walk past, but at the weekends or in the evenings, that was never clear. Most students avoided it anyway. Maybe the feeling of getting away from something everyone else would part of the appeal. In any case, I was doing this little walk one sunny evening. I think it was Senior 3. As usual, I was glancing around the empty rooms as I walked past, and suddenly I was looking into the classroom with Miss Emily in it. She was alone, pacing slowly, talking under her breath, pointing and directing marks to an invisible audience in the room. I assumed she was rehearsing a lesson, or maybe one of her assembly talks, and I was about to hurry past before she spotted me. But just then she turned and looked straight at me. I froze, thinking I was for it, but then noticed she was carrying on as before, except now she was mouthing her address at me. Then, natural as you like, she turned away to fix her gaze on some other imaginary student in another part of the room. I crept away along the path, and for the next hour or so kept dreading what Miss Emily would say to me when she saw me. But she never mentioned it at all. But that's not really what I want to talk about just now. What I want to do is get a few things down with Ruth, about how we met and became friends, about our early days together. Because more and more these days, we'll be driving past fields on a long afternoon, or maybe drinking my coffee in front of a huge window in a motorway service station, and I'll catch myself thinking about her again. She wasn't someone I was friends with from the start. I can remember at 5 or 6 doing things with Hannah and with Laura, but not with Ruth. I only have the vague memory of Ruth from that early part of our lives. I'm playing in a sandpit. There's a number of others in the sand with me. It's too crowded and we're getting irritated with each other. We're in the open under warm sun, so it's probably the sandpit in the infants' play area. Just possibly it's the sand at the end of the long jump in the north playing field. Anyway, it's hot and I'm feeling thirsty, and I'm not pleased there are so many of us in the sandpit. Then Ruth is standing there. Not in the sand with the rest of us, but a few feet away. She's very angry with 2 of the girls somewhere behind me about something that must have happened before, but she's standing there glaring at them. My guess is that I knew Ruth only very slightly at the point, but she must already have made some impression on me because I remember carrying on busily with whatever I was doing in the sand, absolutely dreading the idea of her turning her gaze on me. I didn't say a word, but I was desperate for her to realize I wasn't with the girls behind me and had no part in whatever it was that made her cross. And that's all I remember of Ruth from that early time. We were the same years, so we must have run into each other enough, but aside from the sandpit incident, I don't remember having anything to do with her until the juniors a couple of years later, when we were 7, going on 8. The south playing field was the one used most by the juniors, and it was there in the corner of the polars when Ruth came up to me on one lunchtime, looking at me up and down, and said, "Do you want to ride my horse?" I was in the midst of playing with 2 or 3 others at that point, but it was clear Ruth was addressing only me. This absolutely delighted me, but I made a show of weighing her up before giving a reply. "Well, what's your horse's name?" Ruth came a step closer. "My best horse," she said, "is Thunder. I won't let you ride on him. He's much too dangerous, but if you can ride Bramble, as long as you don't use your crop on him, or if you like, you can have any of the others." She reeled off several other names I didn't now remember. Then she asked, "Have you got any horse of your own?" I looked at her and thought carefully before replying. "No, I don't have any horses." "Not even one?" "No." "All right, you can ride Bramble, and if you like, you can have him to keep, and if you're not, to use your crop on him, and then you've got to come now." My friends had, in any case, turned away and were carrying on with what they were doing, so I gave a shrug and went off with Ruth. The field was filled with playing children, some a lot bigger than the others, and Ruth led the way through them very purposefully, always a pace or 2 in front. When we were almost at the wire mesh boundary with the garden, she turned and said, "Okay, we'll ride them here. You take Bramble." I accepted the invisible rein she's holding out, and then we ride off, riding up and down the fence, sometimes cantering, sometimes at a gallop. I've been correct in my decision to tell Ruth I didn't have any horses of my own, because after a while with Ramble, she let me try her various other horses one by one, showing all sorts of instructions about how to handle each animal's foibles. I told you, you've got to really lean on Daffodil, much more than that. She doesn't like it unless you're right back. I must have done well enough, because eventually she let me have a go on Thunder, her favorite. I don't know how long we spent with our horses that day. It felt a substantial time, but I think we both lost ourselves completely in our game. Then suddenly, for no reason, I could see Ruth brought it all to an end, claiming I was deliberately trying out our horses, and that I'd have to put each of them back in its stable. She put into the selection of the fence, and I began leading the horses to it, but Ruth seemed to get crosser and cross with me, saying I was doing everything wrong. Then she asked, "She likes Miss Gerdeline." Might have been the first time I actually thought about whether I liked a guardian. In the end, I said, "Of course I like her." "But do you really like her? Like, what's special? Like, she's your favorite?" "Yes, I do. She's my favorite." Ruth went on looking at me for a long time. Then finally, she said, "All right, in that case, I'll let you be one of her secret guards." We started to walk back towards the main house then, and I waited for her to explain what she meant, but she didn't. I found out, though, over the next several days. Chapter 5. I'm not sure how long the secret business carried on. When Ruth and I discussed it when I was caring for her down in Dover, she claimed it had been just a matter of 2 or 3 weeks, but that was almost certainly wrong. She was probably embarrassed by it, and so the whole thing had shrunk in her memory. My guess is that it went on for about 9 months, a year even, around when we were 7, going on 8. I was never sure if Ruth had actually invented the secret guard herself, but there is no doubt she was the leader. There was between 6 and 10 of us, the figure changing whenever Ruth allowed in a new member or expelled someone. We believed Miss Gerdeline was the best guardian in Hailsham, and we worked on presents to give her. A large sheet with pressed flowers glued over it comes to mind. Her main reason for existing, of course, was to protect her. By the time I joined the guard, Ruth and the others had already known for ages about the plot to kidnap Miss Gerdeline. Never quite sure who was behind it. We sometimes suspected certain of the senior boys, sometimes boys in our own year. There's a guardian we didn't like much, a Miss Eileen, we thought for a while might be the brains behind it. We didn't know when the abduction would take place, but one thing we felt convinced about was that the woods would come into it. The woods were at the top of the hill that rose behind Hailsham House. All we could really see was a dark fringe of trees, but I certainly wasn't the only one at my age to feel their presence day and night. When it got bad, it was like they cast a shadow over the whole of Hailsham. All you had to do was turn your head or move towards a window, and there they'd be, looming in the distance. Safest was the front of the main house, because you couldn't see them from any of the windows. Even so, you never really got away from them. There were all kinds of horrible stories about the woods. Once, not so long before we got to Hailsham, a boy had had a big row with his friends and run off beyond the Hailsham boundaries. His body had been found 2 days later, up in those woods, tied to a tree with his hands and feet chopped off. Another rumor had it that a girl's ghost wandered through those trees. She'd been a Hailsham student until one day she climbed over a fence just to see what it was like outside. It was a long time before us, when the guardians were much stricter, cruel even. When she tried to get back in, she wasn't allowed. She kept hanging around outside the fences, waiting to be let back inside, but no one let her. Eventually she got off somewhere out there. Something bad happened and she died, but the ghost was always wandering around the woods, gazing over Hailsham, pining to be let back in. The guardians always insisted these stories were nonsense, but then the older students would tell us that was exactly what the guardians had told them when they were younger, and that we'd be told the ghostly truth soon enough, just as they were. The woods played on our imaginations the most after dark, in our dorms as we were trying to fall asleep. You almost thought then you could hear the wind rustling the branches, and talking about it seemed to only make things worse. I remember one night when we were furious with Marge K. She'd done something really embarrassing to us during the day. We chose to punish her by hauling her out of bed, holding her face against the window pane, and ordering her to look up at the woods. At first she kept her eyes screwed shut, but we twisted her arms and forced to open her eyelids until she saw the distant outline against the moonlit sky. That was enough to ensure her first a sobbing night of terror. I'm not saying we necessarily went around the whole time at that age worrying about the woods. I, for one, could go weeks without thinking about them. There are even days when a decent surge of courage would make me think, how could we believe rubbish like that? And then all it took would be one little thing. Someone retelling one of those stories, a scary passage in a book, even just a chance remark reminding you of the woods. And that would mean another period of being under that shadow. It was hardly surprising that we assumed the woods would be central to the plot to abduct Miss Gerdeline. When it came down to it, though, I don't recall our taking many practical steps towards defending Miss Gerdeline. Our activities always revolved around gathering more and more evidence concerning the plot itself. For some reason, we were satisfied that this would keep any immediate danger at bay. Most of our evidence came from witnessing the conspirators at work. One morning, for instance, we watched for a second floor classroom, Miss Eileen and Mr. Roger talking to Miss Girdle lying down in the courtyard. After a while, Miss Girdle said goodbye and went off towards the orangery. We kept on watching and saw Miss Eileen and Mr. Roger put their heads together to confer fervently. Their gaze fixed on Miss Girdle's receding figure. Mr. Roger, Ruth sighed on that occasion, shaking her head. Who would have guessed he was in it, too? In this way, we built up a list of people we knew to be in on the plot, guardians and students whom we declared our sworn enemies. And yet, all the time, I think we might have had an idea of how precarious the foundations of our fantasy were. Because we always avoided any confrontation, we would decide, after intense discussions, that a particular student was a plotter, but then we'd always find a reason not to challenge him just yet, to wait until we had all the evidence. Similarly, we always agreed Miss Girdline herself shouldn't hear a word of what we found out, since she'd get alarmed to no good reason. It wouldn't be too easy to claim it was just Ruth who kept the secret guard going long after we'd naturally outgrown it. Sure enough, the guard was important to her. She'd known about the plot for much longer than the rest of us, and this gave her enormous authority by hinting that the real evidence came from a time before people like me had joined, that there were things she'd yet to reveal to us. She would justify almost any decision she made on behalf of the group. It was decided someone should be expelled, for example, and she sensed opposition. She'd just darkly allude to stuff she knew from before. There's no question Ruth was keen to keep the whole thing going, but the truth was, those of us who'd grown close to her, we each played our part in preserving the fantasy, making it last for as long as possible. What happened after that row with the class illustrates pretty well the point I'm making. I'd assumed Ruth was something of a chess expert, and that she'd be able to teach me the game. This wasn't so crazy. We'd pass older students bent over chess sets and window seats around the grassy slopes, and Ruth would often pause to study a game. As we walked off again, she'd tell me how some moves she spotted that neither player had made. Amazingly dim, she murmured, shaking her head. This had all helped get me fascinated, and I was soon longing to become engaged myself in those ornate pieces. Soon when I found a chess set at a sale and decided to buy it, despite it costing an awful lot of tokens, I was counting on Ruth's help. For the next several days, though, she sighed whenever I brought the subject up, or pretended she had something else really urgent to do. When I finally cornered her one rainy afternoon, we set out bored in the billiards room. She proceeded to show me a game that was vague warrants on draughts. The distinguishing feature of chess, according to her, was that each piece moved in an L shape. I suppose she got this from watching the knight, rather than the leapfrogging way of draughts. I didn't believe this, and I was really disappointed, but I made sure to say nothing and went along with her for a while. We spent several minutes knocking each other's pieces off the board, always sliding the attack pieces in an L. This continued until the game I tried to take her, and she claimed she couldn't count because I had slid my pieces up to hers in too straight a line. At this I stood up, packed up the set, and walked off. I never said out loud that she didn't know how to play. Disappointed as I was, I knew not to go that far, but my storming off was, I suppose, statement enough for her. It was maybe a day later I came into room 20 at the top of the house, where Mr. George had his poetry class. I don't remember if it was before or after the class, or how full the room was. I remember having books in my hands, and then as I moved towards where Ruth and the others were talking, there was a strong patch of sun across the desklets that they were sitting on. I could see from the way they had their heads together they were discussing secret guard stuff, and although, as I say, the row where Ruth had been all the day before, for some reason I went up to them without a second thought. It was only when I was virtually right up to them, maybe there was a look exchanged between them, that it suddenly hit me what was happening. It was like the split second before you step into a puddle. You realize it's there, but there's something you can do about it. I felt the hurt even before they went silent and stared at me, even before Ruth said, "Oh, Kathy, how are you? If you don't mind, we've got something to discuss just now. We'll be finished in just a minute. Sorry." She'd hardly finished her sentence before I turned and was out of my way, angry more at myself for having walked into it than at Ruth and the others. I was upset, no doubt about it, though I don't know if I actually cried. In the next few days, whenever I saw the secret guard conferring in a corner as they walked across the field, I'd feel a flush rising to my cheeks. Then about 2 days after the snub in room 20, I was coming down the stairs of the main house when I found Moria B just behind me. We started talking, about nothing special, and just wandered out of the house together. It must have been the lunch break, because as we stepped into the courtyard, there were about 20 students loitering around, chatting in little groups. My eyes went immediately to the far side of the courtyard, where Ruth and the three of the secret guard were standing together, but their backs to us, gazing intently towards the south playing field. I was trying to see what it was they were so interested. Then it became aware of Moria beside me, also watching them. And then it occurred to me that only a month before she too had been a member of the secret guard and had been expelled. For the next few seconds I felt something like acute embarrassment. The two of us should now be standing side by side, linked by our recent humiliations, actually staring our rejection in the face, as it were. Maybe Moria was expecting something similar, Anyway, she was the one who broke the silence, saying, "It's so stupid, the secret guard thing. How can they still believe in something like that? It's like they're still in the infants." Even though I'm puzzled by the sheer force of the emotion that overtook me when Moria said this, I turned to her, completely furious. "What do you know about it? You don't know anything because you've been out of it for ages now. If you knew anything you found out, you wouldn't dare say anything so daft." "Don't be rubbish." Moria was never one to back down easily. "It's just another one of Ruth's made-up things, that's all." "Then how come I've personally heard them talking about how they're going to take Miss Gerdeline to the woods in the milk van? How come I heard them planning it myself, nothing to do with Ruth or anyone else?" Moria looked at me, unsure now. "You heard it yourself?" "How? Where?" "I heard them talking, clear as anything, heard every word. They don't know I was there, down by the pond. They didn't know I could hear. That just shows how much you know." I pushed past her as I made my way across the crowded courtyard. I glanced back at the figures of Ruth and the others, still gazing out to the south, playing fear, unaware of what had just happened between me and Moria. And I decided I didn't feel angry at all with them anymore, just hugely irritated with Moria. Even now, as I'm driving on a long grave road and my thoughts have nowhere special to go, I might have myself chewing all of this over. Or was I so hostile to Moria B that day when she was really a natural ally? What it was, I suppose, is that Moria was suggesting she and I cross some line together, and I wasn't prepared for that yet. I think I sensed how beyond that line there was something harder and darker, and I didn't want that. Not for me. Not for any of us. But at other times, I think that's wrong. That it was just to do with me and Ruth, and the sort of loyalty she inspired in me in those days. Maybe that's why, even though I really wanted to, on several occasions, I never brought it up about what actually happened that day with Moria, and the whole time I was caring for Ruth down at the center in Dover. All of this about Miss Gerdeline reminded me of something that happened about 3 years later, long after the secret guard idea had faded away. We were in room 5 of the ground floor on the back of the house, waiting for a class to start. Room 5 was the smallest room, and especially on a winter morning like that one, when the big radiators came on and steamed up the windows, it would get pretty stuffy. Maybe I'm exaggerating, but my memory is that for a whole class to fit into that room, the students literally had to pile on top of each other. That morning, Ruth had got a chair behind a desk, and I was sitting up on its lid, with 2 or 3 others of her group perched or leaning in nearby. In fact, I think it was when I was squeezing up to let someone else in beside me that I first noticed the pencil case. I could see the thing now like it's there in front of me. It was shiny like a polished shoe, a deep tan color with circled red dots drifting all over it. The zipper across the top edge had a furry pom-pom to pull it. I almost sat on the pencil case when I'd shifted, and Ruth quickly moved out of my way. But I'd seen it, as she intended me to, and I said, "Oh, where'd you get that? Was it in the sale?" It was noisy in that room, but the girls nearby had heard, so there was soon 4 or 5 of us staring admiringly at the pencil case. Ruth said nothing for a few seconds while she checked carefully the faces around her. Finally, she said, very deliberately, "Let's just agree. Let's agree I got it in the sale." Then she gave us all a knowing smile. This might sound a pretty innocuous sort of response, but actually it was like she'd suddenly got up and hit me. For the next few minutes, I felt hot and chilly at the same time. I knew exactly what she meant by her answer and smile. She was claiming that the pencil case was a gift from Miss Gerdeline. There could be no mistake about this because it had been building up for weeks. There was a certain smile, a certain voice Ruth would use, sometimes accompanied by a finger to the lips, or a hand raised stage whisper style, whenever she wanted to hint about some little mark or favor Miss Gerdeline had showed her. Miss Gerdeline had allowed Ruth to play music tape in the billiards room before 5 o'clock on a weekday. Miss Gerdeline had ordered silence on a fields walk, when Ruth had drawn up beside her. She started to talk to her, and let the rest of the group talk. So it was stuff like that, and never explicitly claimed, just implied by a smile and "let's say no more" expression. Of course, officially, guardians weren't supposed to show favoritism, but there's little displays of affection all the time within certain parameters, and most of what Ruth suggested fell easily within them. Still, I hated it when Ruth hinted at it this way. I was never sure, of course, that if she was really telling the truth, but since she wasn't actually telling it, only hinting, it was never possible to challenge her. So each time it happened, I'd have to let it go, biting my lip and hoping the moment would pass quickly. Sometimes I see from the way a conversation was moving that one of these moments was coming, and I braced myself. Even then, it would always hit me with some force for several minutes I wouldn't be able to concentrate on anything going on around me. But on that winter morning in room 5, it had come to me straight out of the blue. Even after I'd seen the pencil case, the idea of a guardian giving a present like that was so beyond the bounds I hadn't seen it coming at all. So once Ruth had said that, she said, I wasn't able in my usual way to let the emotion flurry just pass. I stared at her, making no word to disguise my anger. Ruth perhaps saw danger, said to me quickly in a stage whisper, "Not a word," and smiled again. But I couldn't return the smile and went on glaring at her. Then luckily the guardian arrived and the class started. I was never the sort of kid who brooded over things for hours on end. I've got that way a bit these days, but that's the work I do in the long hours of quiet when I'm driving across these empty fields. I wasn't like, say, Laura, who, for all her clowning around, could worry for days, weeks even, about some little thing someone said to her. And after that morning in room 5, I did go around in a bit of a trance. I shifted off in the middle of conversations. Whole lessons went by with me not knowing what was going on. I was determined Ruth shouldn't get any away with it this time, but for a long time, I wasn't doing anything constructive about it. Just playing fantastic scenes in my head, where I exposed her and forced her to admit she made it up. Even had one hazy fantasy where Miss Gerline herself heard it and gave Ruth the complete dressing down in front of everyone. After days of this, I started to think more solidly. If the pencil case hadn't come from Miss Gerline, where'd it come from? She might have got it from another student, but that was unlikely. If it had belonged to anyone else first, even someone years above us, a gorgeous item like that wouldn't have gone unnoticed. Ruth would never risk a story like hers knowing the pencil case had already knocked around Hailsham. Almost certainly she found out at a sale. Here, too, Ruth ran the risk of others having seen it before she bought it. But if, as something happened, though, it wasn't really allowed, she'd heard around the pencil case coming in and reserved one of the monitors before the sale opened. She could be then reasonably confident hardly anyone had seen it. Unfortunately for Ruth, though, there were registers kept of everything bought at the sale, along with a record of who'd done the buying. While these registers weren't easily obtainable, the monitors took them back to Miss Emily's office after each sale. They weren't top secret either. If I hung around a monitor at the next sale, it wouldn't be difficult to browse through the pages. So I had the outline of a plan, and I think I went on refraining for it for several days before it occurred to me that it wasn't actually necessary to carry out all the steps. Provided I was right about the pencil case coming from a sale, all I had to do was bluff. This is how Ruth and I came to have our conversation under the eaves. There was fog and drizzle that day. The two of us here walking from the dorm huts, perhaps towards the pavilion. I'm not sure. Anyway, as we were crossing the courtyard, the rain suddenly got heavier, and since we were in no hurry, we tucked ourselves in under the eaves of the main house, a little to one side of the front entrance. We sheltered there for a while, and every so often a student would come running out of the fog, and through the doors of the house, but the rain didn't ease. And the longer we continued to stand there, the more tense I grew because I could see that this was the opportunity I'd been waiting for. Ruth, too, I'm sure, sensed something that was coming up. In the end, I decided to come straight out and say it. At the sale last Tuesday, I said, I was just looking through the book, the register thing. Why are you looking at the register? Ruth asked quickly. Why are you doing something like that? Oh, no reason. Christopher C. was one of the monitors, so I was just talking to him. He's the best senior boy, definitely, and I was just turning through the pages of the register, just for something to do. Ruth's mind, I could tell, had raced on, and she knew exactly what was this about, but she said calmly, boring sort of thing to look at. No, it's quite interesting, really. You can see all the things people have bought. I said this staring out in the rain. Then I glanced at Ruth and got a real shock. I don't know what I expected. For all my fantasies of the past month, I never really considered what it would be like in a real situation like the one unfolding at that moment. Then I saw how upset Ruth was, how for once she was at a complete loss for words, and I turned away on the verge of tears, and suddenly my behavior seemed to be utterly baffling. All this effort, all this planning just to upset my dearest friend. So what if she fibbed a little about her pencil case? Didn't we all dream about, time to time, about one guardian or other bending the rules and doing something special for us? A spontaneous hug, a secret letter, a gift. All Ruth had done was take one of these harmless daydreams a step further. She hadn't even mentioned Miss Gerline by name. I now felt awful, and I was confused. As we stood there together staring at the fog and rain, I could think of no way to repair the damage I'd done. I think I said something pathetic like, "It's all right. I didn't see anything much," which hung stupidly in the air. Then after a few seconds of silence, Ruth walked off into the rain. Chapter 6. I think I felt better about what had happened if Ruth had held it against me in some obvious way. But this was one instance when she seemed just to cave in. It was like she was too ashamed of the matter, too crushed by it, even to be angry or to want to get me back. First few times I saw her after the conversation under the eaves, I was ready for at least a bit of huffiness, but no. She was completely civil, if a little flat. It occurred to me that she was scared I'd expose her. The pencil case, sure enough, vanished from view, and I wanted to tell her she'd nothing to fear from me. The trouble was, because none of this had actually been talked about in the open, I couldn't find a way of bringing it all up with her. I did my best, meanwhile, to take any opportunity to imply to Ruth that she was a special place in Miss Gerline's heart. There was this time, for example, when a bunch of us were desperate to go out and practice rounders during break because we were challenged by a group from the year above. Our problem was that it was raining, and it looked unlikely we'd be allowed outside. I noticed, though, that Miss Gerline was one of the guardians on the duty, so I said, if Ruth goes and asks Miss Gerline, then we'd stand a chance. As far as I remember, the suggestion wasn't taken up. Maybe hardly anyone heard it, because a lot of us were talking all at once, but the point is, I said it standing right behind Ruth, and I could see she was pleased. Then another time a few of us were leaving a classroom with Miss Girdline, and I happened to find myself about to go out to the door right after Miss Girdline herself. What I did was to slow right down so that Ruth, coming behind me, couldn't step past to the door beside Miss Girdline. I did this without any fuss, as though it was the natural proper thing and what Miss Girdline would like, just the way I'd have done if, say, I'd accidentally gotten myself between two best friends. On that occasion, as far as I remember, Ruth looked puzzled and surprised for a split second. They gave me a quick nod and went past. Little things like this might have well pleased Ruth, but they were still far from removed from what had actually happened between us under the eaves that foggy day, in the sense that I'd never be able to start. Things just continued to grow. There's a particular memory I have of sitting by myself one evening on one of the benches outside the pavilion, trying over and over to think of some way out, while a heavy mix of remorse and frustration brought me virtually to tears. If things had stayed the same, I'm not sure what would have happened. Maybe it'd have all gotten forgotten eventually. Maybe Ruth and I would have drifted apart. As it was, right out of the blue, a chance came along for me to put things right. We were in the middle of one of Mr. Rogers' art lessons, except for some reason he'd gone out halfway. So we were all just drifting around among the easels, chatting and looking at each other's work. Then at one point, a girl named Midge A came over to where we were and said to Ruth, in a perfectly friendly way, "Where's your pencil case? It's so luscious." Ruth tensed and glanced quickly about to see who was present. It was our usual gang, with perhaps a couple of outsiders loitering nearby. I hadn't mentioned to a soul anything about the sales register business, but I suppose Ruth wasn't to know that. Her voice was softer than usual when she replied to Midge. "I haven't got it here. I keep it in my collection chest." "It's so luscious. Where'd you get it?" Midge was quizzing her completely innocently. That was now obvious, but almost all of us who'd been in room 5 the time Ruth had first brought up the case here were looking, and I saw Ruth hesitate. It was only later, when I replayed it all, that I appreciated how perfectly shaped a chance it was for me. At the time I didn't really think. I just came in before Midge or anyone else had the chance to notice Ruth was in a curious quandary. "We can't say where it's from." Ruth, Midge, the rest of them, they all looked at me, maybe a little surprised, but I kept my cool and went on, addressing only Midge. "There's some very good reasons why we can't tell you where it came from." Midge shrugged. "So it's a mystery." "A big mystery," I said, thinking for a style to show her I wasn't trying to be nasty to her. The others were nodding back to me, though Ruth herself got another vague expression, like she'd suddenly become preoccupied with something else entirely. Midge shrugged again, and as far as I remember, that was the end of it. Either she walked off or else she started talking about something different. Now, for much the same reasons I've not been able to talk openly to Ruth about what I'd done to her over the sales register business, she of course wasn't able to thank me for the way I'd intervened with Midge. It was obvious from her manner towards me, not just for the next few days, but over the next weeks that followed, how pleased she was with me, and having recently been in much the same position, it was easy to recognize the signs of her looking around for some opportunity to do something nice, something really special for me. It was a good feeling, and I remember even thinking once or twice how it would be better if she didn't get a chance for ages, just so the good feeling between us would go on and on. As it was, an opportunity did come along for her, about a month after the Midge episode, the time I lost my favorite tape. I still have a copy of that tape, and until recently, I listened to it occasionally driving out in the open country on a drizzly day. But now the tape machine is in my car. It got so dodgy I didn't dare play it in that. And there never seems enough time to play it when I'm back in my bed sit. Even so, it's one of my few precious possessions. Maybe come the end of the year, when I'm no longer a carer, I'll be able to listen to it more often. The album's called Songs After Dark, and it's by Judy Bridgewater. What I've got today isn't the actual cassette, the one I had back then at Hailsham, the one I lost. It's the one Tommy and I found in Norfolk years afterward, but that's another story I'll come to later. What I want to talk about is the first tape, the one that disappeared. I should explain before I got any further that this whole thing we had these days about Norfolk, we kept it going for years and years. It became a sort of in-joke, I suppose. And it all started from one particular lesson we had when we were pretty young. It was Miss Emily herself who taught us about the different counties of England. She'd pin it up in a big map over the blackboard next to it, set up an easel, and if she was talking about, say, Oxfordshire, she'd place on the easel a large calendar with photos of the county. She had quite a few of these picture calendars, and we go through most of the counties this way. She'd tap a spot on the map with her pointer, turn to the easel, and reveal another picture. There'd be little villages, with streams going through them, white monuments of hillsides, old churches beside fields. If she was telling us about a coastal place, there'd be beaches crowded with people, cliffs with seagulls. I suppose she wanted us to have a grasp of what was out there and surrounding us. It's amazing, even now, after all these miles I've covered as a carer, the extent to which my idea of the various counties is still set by these pictures Miss Emily put up on her easel. I'd be driving through Derbyshire, say, and catch myself looking for a particular village, green with a mock Tudor pub and a war memorial, and realize it's the image Miss Emily showed us the first time I ever heard of Derbyshire. Anyway, the point is that there was a gap in Miss Emily's calendar collection. None of them had a single picture of Norfolk. We had these same lectures repeated a number of times, and I've always wondered if this time she found a picture of Norfolk. But it was always the same. She'd wave her pointer around the map and say, as a sort of afterthought, "And over here we've got Norfolk. Very nice, sir." Then that particular time, I remember how she paused and drifted off into thought. Maybe because she hadn't planned what should happen next instead of a picture. Eventually came out of her dream and tapped the map again. "You see, because it's stuck out here on the east on this hump jutting into the sea, it's not on the way to anywhere. People going north and south," she moved the pointer up and down, "they bypass it altogether, but that's the reason. It's a peaceful corner by England, rather nice, but it's also something of a lost corner." A lost corner. That's what she called it. And that was what started it. Because at Hailsham we had our own lost corner up on the 3rd floor, where the lost property was kept. If you lost or found anything, that's where you went. Someone, I can't remember who it was, claimed after the lesson that what Miss Emily had said was that Norfolk was England's lost corner. All the lost property found in the country ended up. Somehow this idea caught on and soon had become accepted fact virtually throughout our entire school. Not long ago, when Tommy and I were reminiscing about all of this, he thought we'd never really believed the notion, that it was a joke right from the start, but I'm pretty certain he was wrong there. Sure enough, by the time we were 12 or 13, the Norfolk thing had become a big joke. My memory of it, and Ruth remembered it the same way. At the beginning, we believed in Norfolk, in the most literal way. Just that our lorries came to Hailsham with their food and staff from our sales. There was some similar operation going on, except at a grander scale, with vehicles moving all over England, delivering anything left behind in fields and trains to this place called Norfolk. The fact that we'd never seen a picture of the place only added to its mystique. This might all sound daft, but you have to remember that to us, at this stage in our lives, any place beyond Hailsham was like a fantasy land. We had only the haziest notion of the world outside, and about what was and what wasn't possible. Besides, we never bothered to examine our Norfolk theory in any detail. What was important to us, as Ruth said one evening when we were sitting in that tiled room in Dover, looking out the sunset, was, when we lost something precious, and we looked out and looked, we couldn't find it, we didn't have to completely heartbroken. We still had that last bit of comfort, thinking one day, when we were grown up, we were free to travel around the country, we could always go and find it again, in Norfolk. I'm sure Ruth was right about Norfolk, come to a real source of comfort for us, probably much more than we admitted at the time, and that was why we were still talking about it, albeit as a sort of joke. When we were much older, and that's why years and years later, that day Tom and I found another copy of that lost tape of mine in a town on the Norfolk coast, we didn't just think it was pretty funny. We both felt deep down some tug, some old wish to believe again in something that was once close to our hearts. But I wanted to talk about my tape. Songs After Dark by Judy Bridgewater. I suppose it was originally an LP, the recording date 1956. What I had was the cassette, and the cover picture was what must have been a scaled-down version of the record sleeve. Judy Bridgewater is wearing a purple satin dress, one of those off-the-shoulder ones popular in these days, and you could see her from just above the waist that she's sitting on a bar stool. I think it's supposed to be South America, because there are palms behind her and swarthy waiters in white tuxedos. We're looking at Judy from exactly where the barman would be when he's serving her drinks. She's looking back in a friendly, not too sexy way, like she might be flirting just a tiny bit, but you're someone she knows from way back. Now the other thing about this cover is that Judy's got her elbows up on the bar, and there's a cigarette burning in her hand, and it's because of this cigarette that I got so secretive about the tape, right from the moment I found it at the sale. I don't know how it was where you were, but at Hailsham the guardians were really strict about smoking. I'm sure they'd have preferred it if we were never found out smoking even existed, but since this wasn't possible, they made sure to give us some sort of lecture each time any reference to cigarettes came around. Even if we were being shown a picture of a famous writer or world leader and they happened to have a cigarette in their hand, then the whole lesson would grind to a halt, and there was even a rumor that some classic book like the Sherlock Holmes one weren't in our library because the main characters smoked too much, and when you came across a page torn out of an illustration book or magazine, it was because there's been a picture on it of someone smoking. And then there was the actual lessons where they showed us horrible pictures of what smoking did to the insides of your body. That's why that it was still such a shock that Marge K. asked Miss Lucy her question. We were sitting on the grass after a Rounders match, and Miss Lucy had been giving us a typical talk on smoking, when Marge suddenly asked if Miss Lucy had herself even had a cigarette. Miss Lucy went quiet for a few seconds, and she said, "I like to be able to say no, but to be honest, I did smoke for a little while, for about 2 years when I was younger." You can imagine what a shock this was. Before Miss Lucy's reply, we'd all been glaring at Marge, really furious that she'd asked such a rude question. To us, she might as well have asked if Miss Lucy had ever attacked anyone with an axe. And for days afterwards, I remember how we made Marge's life such an utter mystery. In fact, that incident I mentioned before, the night we held Marge's face to the dorm window to make her look at the woods, that was all part of what came afterwards. But at the time, the moment Miss Lucy said what she said, we were all too confused to think anymore about Marge. I think we all just stared at Miss Lucy in horror, waiting for what she'd say next. When she did speak, Miss Lucy seemed to be weighing up each word carefully. "It's not good that I smoked. It wasn't good for me so I stopped it. That's what you must understand, if that for you, all of you, it's much, much worse to smoke than it ever was for me." Then she paused and went quiet. Someone said later she'd gone off into a daydream, but I'm pretty sure, as was Ruth, that she was thinking hard about what to say next. Finally she said, "You've been told about it. You're students. You're special. So keeping yourselves well, keeping yourselves very healthy inside, that's much more important for each of you than it is for me." She stopped again and looked at us in a strange way. Afterwards, when we discussed it, some of us were sure she was dying for someone to ask, "Why? Why is it so much worse for us?" But no one did. I've often thought about that day, and I'm sure now, in the light of what happened later, that we only need to ask, and Mrs. C would have told us all kinds of things. All it would have taken was just one more question about smoking. So why had we stayed silent that day? I suppose it was because even at that age, we were 9 or 10, we just knew enough to make us wary of that whole territory. It's hard now to remember how such things we knew by then. We certainly knew, though not in any deep sense, that we were different from our guardians, and also from the normal people outside. We perhaps even knew that a long way down the line, there were donations waiting for us. But we didn't really know what that meant. If we were keen to avoid certain topics, it's probably more because it embarrassed us. We hated the way our guardians, usually so on top of everything, became so awkward whenever we came near this territory. It unnerved us to see them change like that. I think that's why we never asked for one further question, why we punished Marge K so cruelly for bringing it up that day after the Rounders match. Anyway, that's why I was so secretive about my tape. I even turned the cover inside out so you'd only see Judy and her cigarette if you opened up the plastic case. But the reason the tape meant so much to me was nothing to do with the cigarette, or even the way Judy Bridgewater sang. She's one of those singers from her time, cocktail bar stuff, not the sort of thing any of us at Hailsham liked. What made the tape so special for me was this one particular song, track number 3, "Never Let Me Go." It's slow and late night and American. There's a bit that keeps coming around when Judy sings, "Never let me go, oh baby, baby, never let me go." I was 11 then and hadn't listened to much music, but this one song, it really got to me. I always tried to keep that tape wound to just that spot so I could play the song whenever a chance came by. I don't have so many opportunities, mind you, this being a few years before Walkmans started appearing at the sales. There was a big machine in the billiards room, and I hardly ever played the tape in there because it was always full of people. The art room also had a player, but that was usually just as noisy. The only place I could listen properly was in our dorm. But then we gone into the small 6-bed dorms over in the separate huts, and in ours we had a portable cassette player up on the shelves above the radiator. So that's where I used to go, in the day when no one was likely to be about, to play my song over and over. What was so special about the song? Well, the thing was, I didn't use to listen properly to the words. I just waited for that bit that went, "Baby, baby, never let me go." And what I'd imagined was a woman who'd been told she couldn't have babies, who really, really wanted them all her life. And there's a sort of miracle, and she's a baby, and she holds the baby very close to her and walks around singing, "Baby, never let me go." Partly because she's so happy, but also because she's afraid that something will happen. The baby will get ill or be taken away from her. Even at the time, I realized that this couldn't be right, that the interpretation didn't fit with the rest of the lyrics, but that wasn't an issue with me. The song was about what I said, and I used to listen to it again and again, on my own, whenever I got the chance. There's one strange incident around this time I could tell you about here. It really unsettled me, and although I wasn't to find out about its real meaning until years later, I think I sensed even then some deeper significance to it. It was a sunny afternoon, and I'd gone to our dorm to get something. I remember how bright it was because the curtains in our room hadn't been pulled back properly, and you could see the sun coming in its big shafts, all the dust in the air. I hadn't meant to play the tape, but since I was there all by myself, an impulse made me get the cassette out of my collection box and put it in the player. Maybe the volume had been turned right up by whoever had been using it last. I don't know, but it was much louder than I usually had it, and that was probably why I didn't hear her before I did. Maybe I just got complacent by then. Anyway, what I was doing was swaying around slowly in time to the song, holding an imaginary baby to my breast. In fact, to make it all the more embarrassing, it was one of those times I grabbed a pillow to stand in for the baby, and I was doing this slow dance, my eyes closed, singing along softly each time those lines came around. "Oh, baby, baby, never let me go." The song was almost over when something made me realize I wasn't alone. I opened my eyes to find myself staring at Madame framed in the doorway. I froze in shock. Then within a second or two I began to feel a new kind of alarm, because I could see that what was something strange about the situation. The door was almost half open. It was a sort of rule we didn't close dorm doors completely except when we were sleeping. But Madame hadn't nearly come up into the threshold. She was out in the corridor, standing very still, her head angled to one side to give her view what I was doing inside. The odd thing was when she was crying. I didn't even have one of her sobs. I might have even been one of her sobs that came through the song that jerked me out of my dream. When I think about this now, it seemed to me Even if she wasn't a guardian, she was the adult, and she should have said or done something, even if it was just to tell me off. Then I'd have known how to behave. But she went on standing out there, sobbing and sobbing, staring at me through the doorway, and with that some look in her eyes that she always had when she looked at us, except that she was saying something that gave her the creeps, except this time there was something else, something extra in that look I couldn't fathom. I didn't know what to do or say, or what to expect next. Perhaps she would come into the room and shout at me, hit me even. I didn't have a clue. As it was, she turned, and the next moment I could hear the footsteps leaving the hut. I realized the tape had gone on to the next track, and I turned it off and sat down on the nearest bed. And as I did so, I saw through the window in front of me her figure hurrying off to the main house. She didn't glance back, but I could tell from the way her back was hunched up she was still sobbing. When I got back to my friends a bit later, I didn't tell them anything about what happened. Someone noticed I wasn't right and said something, but I just shrugged and kept quiet. I wasn't ashamed exactly. It was just a bit about that earlier time. We all waylaid Madame in the courtyard, and she got out of her car. What I wished more than anything was that the thing hadn't happened at all, and I thought that by not mentioning it, I'd be doing myself and everyone else a favor. I did, though, talk to Tommy about it a couple of years later. This was in those days following our conversation by the pond when he first confided to me about Miss Lucy, the days during which, as I see it, we started off our whole thing for wondering and asking questions about ourselves that we got going between us through the years. When I told Tommy about what had happened with Madame in the dorm, he came up with a fairly simple explanation. But then, of course, we all knew something I hadn't known back then, which is that none of us could have babies. It's just possible I somehow picked up the idea when I was younger without fully registering it, and that's why I heard what I did when I listened to that song. But there's no way I had known properly back then. As I say, by the time Tommy and I were discussing it, we'd have been told clearly enough. None of us, incidentally, were particularly bothered by it. In fact, I remember some people being pleased that we could have sex without worrying about all of that. The proper sex was still some way off for most of us at that stage. Anyway, when I told Tommy about what happened, he said, Madame's probably not a bad person, even though she's creepy. So when she saw you dancing like that, holding your baby, she thought it was really tragic, how you couldn't have babies. That's why she started crying. But Tommy, I pointed out, how could she have known the song had anything to do with people having babies? How could she have known the pillow I was holding was supposed to be a baby? It was only in my head. Tell me about this, and said half-jokingly, maybe Madame can read minds. She's strange. Maybe she can see right inside of you. It wouldn't surprise me. This gave us both a little chill, and though we giggled, we didn't say any more about it. The tape disappeared a couple of months after the incident with Madame. I never linked the two events at the time, and I had no reason to link them now. I was in the dorm one night, just before lights out, and was rummaging through my collection chest to pass the time with the others came back in the bathroom. It's odd, but when it first dawned on me that the tape wasn't there anymore, my main thought was that I mustn't given away how panicked I was. I can remember exactly making a point of humming absent-mindedly while I went on searching. I've thought about it a lot, and I still don't know how to explain it. These were my closest friends in that room with me, and yet I didn't want them to know how upset I was about my tape going missing. I suppose it had something to do with maybe a secret, just about how it meant to me. Maybe all of us at Hailsham had little secrets like that, little private nooks created out of thin air. We could go off alone with our fears and longings. The very fact that we had such needs would have felt wrong to us at the time, like somehow we were letting this side down. Anyway, once I was quite sure the tape was gone, I asked each of the others in the room very casually if they'd seen it. I wasn't yet completely distraught because that was the chance I'd left it in the billiards room. Maybe my hope was that someone had borrowed it and would give it back in the morning. Well, the tape didn't turn up the next day, and I still have no idea what happened to it. The truth is, I suppose, there are far more thieving going on at Hailsham than we, or the guardians, ever wanted to admit. But the reason I'm going into all this now is to explain about Ruth and how she reacted. What you have to remember is that I lost my tape less than a month after that time Midge had quizzed Ruth in the art room about her pencils case. I had come to the rescue. For instance, as I told you, Ruth had been looking for something nice to do for me in return, and the tape disappearing gave her a real opportunity. You could even say it wasn't even after my tape vanished that things got back to normal between us. Maybe for the first time since that rainy morning I had mentioned a sales register to her under the eaves of the main house. The night I first noticed the tape was gone, I made sure to ask everyone about it, and of course had included Ruth. Looking back, I could see how she must have realized then and there exactly what losing the tape meant to me, and at the same time how important it was for me that there was no fuss. So she replied that night with a distracted shrug and got on with what she was doing. But the next morning when I was coming back from the bathroom, I could hear her in a casual, like it wasn't anything much, asking Hannah if she was sure she hadn't seen my tape. Maybe a fortnight later, and when I was long reconciled myself to having truly lost my tape, she came and found me during the lunch break. It was one of the first really good days of spring that year, and I was sitting on the grass talking with a couple of the older girls. And Ruth came up and asked me if I wanted to go for a little stroll. It was obvious she had something particular on her mind. So I left the older girls and followed her to the edge of the north playing field, then up to the north hill, until we were standing there by the wooden fence looking down on the sweep of grass dotted with clusters of students. I remember being surprised by it because I hadn't noticed it down on the grass. We stood there looking over the grounds for a while. And then she held out a little bag to me. When I looked at it, I could tell there was a cassette tape inside, and my heart leapt. And Rube said immediately, "Kathy, it's not your one, the one you lost. I tried to find it for you, but it's really gone." "Yeah," I said, "gone to Norfolk." We both laughed, and I took the tape out of the bag with a disappointed air, and I'm not sure that the disappointment wasn't still on my face when I examined it. I was holding something called 20 Classic Dance Tunes. When I played it later, I discovered it was the orchestra stuff from ballroom dancing. Of course, the moment she was giving it to me, I didn't know what sort of music it was, but I did know it wasn't anything like Judy Bridgewater. Then again, almost immediately, I saw Ruth wasn't to know that. How to Ruth, who didn't know the first thing about music, the tape might easily make up for the one I lost. And suddenly I felt the disappointment ebbing away and being replaced by a real happiness. We didn't do things like hug each other much at Hailsham, but I squeezed one of her hands in both mine, and I thanked her. She said, "I found out the last sale. I just thought it was the sort of thing you liked." And I said that yes, it's exactly the sort of thing. I still have it now. I don't play it much because the music has nothing to do with anything. It's an object, like a brooch or a ring, and especially now Ruth has gone, it's one of my most precious possessions.